This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Hey, tonight you can join me. I'm Guardsy. 8:30, Tom's Watch Bar, downtown Minneapolis. We'll have the Wolves versus Grizzlies live on all the screens. Delicious food and drinks, your chance to secure exclusive KFAN swag, and a chance to qualify for Wolves season finale tickets. All the details on all of our watch parties, KFAN.com, keyword calendar. Come hang with us tonight at Tom's.
Alan Horton in 30 minutes, Pete Nigerian in an hour. The inbox will be opened about 5:45 or so. A couple of aviation stories that caught my attention. This one's, I think, from earlier today. Apparently, 2 American Airlines jets clipped wings on a runway at Reagan Airport. Now, I need clarification because earlier what I thought I saw was it wasn't an active runway where they clipped wings, but it was a taxiway, which neither's good. I'm not saying either is good, but that's getting some attention, especially because of the airport at which it apparently took place. And here's the other one. Did you see this?
From New York?
From New York, the story. This was a flight that was headed, I believe, for Milan, Italy, from JFK. It was also an American Airlines flight. And it was about halfway through the flight. It returned to New York after a passenger became disruptive mid-flight. And the accusations are that he was upset about his meal and about seating arrangements. As I understand it, now I don't know if this was the kind of thing where, he ordered his meal 6 months early. You can do that, I guess. And they didn't have it. When they got to his seat, he said, "Where's my special meal?" And they said, "Can't find it, sir. You're going to have to take the veal in wine sauce. That's all we've got." And he lost his mind. Now, I would be irked by that. I'm not sure it would rise to the level where I would cause such a disruption that people would get terrified. And ultimately, the decision had to be made to return to home base, which is what happened. And then the other thing was, I believe and I don't know how this happened. I don't know how if he was assigned this seat or just sat in this seat, that he was in an emergency exit row with a baby.
Can't do that.
Which you can't do. And that also, he apparently objected to that. One of the reports I saw said he did try to move forward to get into go to the cockpit. I don't think he was very successful in it, but it became disruptive enough and passengers became frightened enough that ultimately the decision was made about halfway across the pond to turn back around and land safely at JFK. And there are also some horror stories once you got there about, the passengers were kind of on their own regarding hotels or where they were going to, and because I think they were able to then start the flight over again, something like 6 or 7 or 8 hours later. I don't know the particulars on that. But every once in a while we get one of these stories. And it is confounding, is it not, that I generally associate liquor with these stories because it seems like that's part of it, that you'd say, well, otherwise, how is it possible someone could get that irrational about those issues to the point where they are so disruptive that the conclusion is we have to go back? Then I also thought I saw a report indicating he was released without any charges being filed. Is that possible, or did I miss something?
It shouldn't be.
No, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be possible, no.
I'm not saying, go to prison for the rest of his life, but there have to be some ramifications to being disruptive, whatever you think your complaint is to that point where you're terrifying fellow customers.
I hadn't seen that story. When I said New York, I was referring to something that's developed here in the last hour or so where a helicopter has crashed into the Hudson River.
Yeah, that was another one.
And they know there are some fatalities, but they haven't released exactly how many. 5 people, including 3 children, have been recovered and at least taken to a hospital in the Hudson River, if I didn't mention that. So they're still kind of trying to figure out everything that happened there.
Not good. I did see a couple reports on that story.
On a lighter note, in airline travel, did you see the story about the plane that had to turn around? They were going somewhere internationally from San Francisco that had to turn around because the pilot had forgotten his passport?
No, I hadn't seen that one.
Now, how mad would you be about that?
I would be pretty angry.
They said it was a crew issue, and then
that was the crew issue.
The crew issue was the pilot didn't have the passport, and I had to think, like, that there has to be a better way.
Has to be.
Then,
yes.
Sorry, the pilot's going to have to stay on the plane.
Yeah,
the rest of us are going. We're not turning around.
No.
He can do whatever needs to be done when we get there. I think they were going to Japan from San Francisco.
Yeah, there has to be there doesn't have to be some airline process that can ease you through whatever needs to be done, because to have that happen at the inconvenience of the everyone else is ridiculous. It really is.
I think they were like 90 minutes into the flight too when he realized it.
Well, and
so then he got to turn around.
They used the clever language.
Crew issue, which
makes it sound like, well, maybe there was a health issue.
Right. Nope.
Or something like, we forgot the co-pilot or something like that.
Crew
issue is very different than the idiot forgot his passport.
That's brutal.
Yeah, that's not very good.
How is there not a better mechanism just in general?
There should be.
A lot of times you have to put your passport info now into your boarding pass. So there's always a way. And I was talking to some people, some friends. The whole passport phenomenon is really starting to fascinate me.
Well, I got passport issues, by the way.
Do you?
You had
yours taken away?
No, I let it expire, and so doesn't the process, as opposed to renewing, doesn't it become like exponentially more difficult once you let it lapse? And I'm going to need it late June.
I know, but that's kind of where I was going. Is what confounds me is, you can get it renewed right now. You could go do it today or sign up or do whatever, and they'll say, yeah, it's probably like 6 months.
Yeah.
Or
you can pay an expedited fee.
In some cases, including a friend of mine who realized the night before his trip to Mexico, his passport had expired.
The night before?
The night before.
What did he do?
You go to the office.
Yeah.
And you can get it really, really expedited. And I'm glad for him. He did miss
what
a day.
Office? Like the passport office?
The passport office downtown, the federal building.
Okay.
Because I've had to go down there too, and it's a great office. People are super helpful.
Yes.
But how does this make any sense? And I'm glad he got his passport. I want to be clear. He's probably listening, so he could join his family in Mexico on spring break. That you can apply for your passport renewal, and they'll get to it when they get to it. Or if you really need it, we can get it to you by noon. Like, that doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, it's they're saying we're going to make you pay a fee.
Yeah.
We're going to punish you to that extent, and then that's what you're paying for, I guess, I see what you're saying.
It shouldn't take, if it can take that short, it should never take that long, I guess is my point.
I mean, I got two tracks I'm dealing with. I got that, and then I got the Real ID thing, which I'm told I haven't even applied for, I'm told that means I've got no chance to get it before the deadline, the Real ID.
See, I thought that was pretty easy. I thought you just did that when you renewed your license.
It probably is.
I think I have that.
Than I thought. Yeah.
But my buddy told me that the passport office on that particular day was lined with what I'll call West Metro idiots that just forgot.
Yes.
That just forgot, or he thought in this case that his wife's passport was good. He thought they had them done together. So there must have been somewhere along the line where she renewed it or she got a new one. He didn't at the same time. But I just think that's so funny that it'll either take forever or just wait here for 3 hours and we'll make sure that you get it before you have to get on your flight.
All right.
It's got to be a middle ground.
I would think there would be, but I'll now I have to take all these issues under consideration. I'm not complaining. I'm aware there are bigger problems in the world. And in this case, it's my fault. I don't even know what I was thinking. But I thought I've always been told it's a lot harder to renew. It's not impossible, but once you lapse, then
you'll be okay.
It's more complicated than if you just ahead of the date that it's expiring. I want to renew my passport, that kind of thing. I've got a consumer story I want to get to when we come back as well regarding a recent trip that I took, and we'll give you some breaking, not quite so good Minnesota Twins news as well. Then we'll prepare for Alan Horton at the bottom of the hour.
Get ready for a night of high-octane country rock. Brantley Gilbert bringing his electrifying show to the Ledge Amphitheater Friday, May 9th. Don't miss out on the action. You can get the full details and your tickets at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Well, your Minnesota Twins wrapped up a 4-game series with the Kansas City Royals, the day game in Kansas City, and the Twins lose 3-2, so they end up losing 3 of 4 games in the series. Their only victory was a shutout last night. We have, I think, let me double-check the current record of the club. I just had the MLB standings. We dropped to... Thank God for the White Sox. We dropped to 4-9, only a game and a half ahead of the 2-10 White Sox. And in this case, we lose the lead late. We were up 2-1 in the 7th. Royals scored a pair of runs off of your guy, Cole Sands, and the rally began with a hit batsman. That's always, you know that old thing at the Metrodome, that sign, walks will haunt?
Yep.
So will HBs, hit batsman as well. And it did in this case for sure. It started there, then there was a single, and then there was a game-tying RBI, a single, and then the go-ahead run was scored on apparently a sacrifice fly driven in by your guy, Bobby Witt Jr. So we lose 3 out of 4. We continue to have an awful lot of trouble, one could say, scoring runs. And our number one starting pitcher is, it ends up, they believe it's a relatively minor, I think they're calling it a grade 1 hamstring, right?
Yep.
But
couple of weeks.
Grade 1 means he's going to be on the injured list, so Pablo Lopez hits the injured list. Your guy, David Festa, is expected to start for the Twins on Friday against the Detroit Tigers. So, what are you going to do? I mean, it continues to just be bad in drips and drabs, right? They're not getting humiliated, but they're just constantly finding ways to lose. They're doing nothing to perk people up to pay attention to the club early in this season. So that's sadly where we are.
We know it's not good baseball.
No, it's not. And I was looking for let me see if I can find it here on the fly. Oh, here it is. Yeah, a tweet to both of us. Twins lose again today. Kansas City takes the 3 out of 4. Getting late early for the Twins. This team seems so dead in the water. Is it time for Rocco to go? Seems like there's no motivation on this team. You can do it. It wouldn't be unprecedented to make a change for the sake of making a change. I do not in any way, shape, or form think Rocco Baldelli is this team's problem. I don't. I think the lineup is thin at best. The starting pitching has not been as effective early as it was supposed to be. And to a certain extent, the bullpen has been rendered irrelevant because
they never have to use it.
They never have to use it in situations where, you're trying to hold on to a victory at this point. So, the team has not been ambitious enough before last season, especially building on what had taken place the season before and the postseason. They followed that up by doing nothing of significance at the trade deadline, and they followed that up by doing nothing of significance this offseason. I don't know how that's Rocco's fault. I honestly, I don't. To me, if you make a move like that, you're just making a move because you're trying to take the heat off yourselves. And you're trying to say, well, maybe we need a new voice, or we just needed something to, get things. And I don't know that there's any indication that there's any stomach even within the organization to move on Rocco. But I'm just saying that if you do that, to me, unless there's a piece that I'm missing, I would shake my head at that move and call it just that it would smack of desperation and an attempt to distract people from the real problems with this team from ownership on down. And as we talked about earlier in the week, the lineup is just, the lineup is at its best is just okay. Injured, it's feeble. And even with Correa, it's semi-feeble. Because as good a baseball player as he still is and has been, as we said, he's no longer a guy you can build a whole lineup around. You can, and he started slow, I might add as well. So, knock yourselves out if you want to go after Rocco, if you still have you still feel traumatized because you believe he took starting pitchers out too early, too soon a couple of years ago. Let's remember when he had big time, a real starting rotation that was professional. He had no difficulty, it seemed to me, keeping starting pitchers in the ballgame most of the time. Now, I might have even then disagreed with him a couple of times, but that's neither here nor there. So I just, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put any of this on Rocco. And I think, again, fans tend to want somebody more fiery than he is. Now, he got into it the other day and got thrown out regarding the pitch clock violation, but he's not generally, he's not that guy. He's certainly not Ron Gardenhire, right? He's not going to be screaming endlessly. He's not going to fill up the notebook. He's not going to give you quips. Frankly, he's rarely even going to savage the team publicly. Now, he did have that meltdown last year, if you recall, that I think started in a team meeting, and I don't know if he went public with it or not, but that got out. But to me, it doesn't make much sense to me. I mean, did the team collapse down the stretch last year? Yeah, they did. But I can't, again, say that Rocco was responsible for that. You had a number of players who just failed at the switch, and teach their own on that particular issue. But
I'm with you on everything you just said.
I've sensed on Rocco, like I said, that he's not that popular for all kinds of reasons that might not have anything to do with reality. Because I don't get specifics on, here's the contradiction. If you're in the group that says this team failed when it cut $30 million from the payroll at the wrong time, even if they had a financial right to do it because of the regional deal, if you're in that group because you believe that they didn't help that team, help that core get better, which sent the wrong message in the locker room, did nothing at the trade deadline last year, did nothing all that ambitious this year either, and that you're bugged by that, then I'm not sure how you could also say it's all Rocco's fault. To me, if you're in the first camp, you can't totally be in the second camp too, I don't think, because the first camp would indicate that the manager and the players haven't been given enough assistance where maybe you give yourself a better chance. I think Sonny Gray came back to the pack a little bit last year compared to the year before with the Twins.
Yeah.
So who knows if they'd kept him. But and I know what he represented when he was here. And they didn't replace him. They didn't. And so, yeah, are there players that were here that failed down the stretch, including some big-name players to a certain extent? Yeah. I guess you can put some of that on Rocco. But if you believe their issues is, again, not being aggressive enough, creative enough of going out and adding to the base, how's that on Rocco? I don't know. You want to get into specific strategy, a play here or a decision there, go ahead. That's fine. That's fair game. But I'm not necessarily bothered by his strategery, so to speak.
And in fairness, like you say, we haven't really gotten a good look at it the last 6 months of actual baseball because of injuries and because of who they haven't had. Certainly last year. I thought 2 years ago, like you said, he did an awesome job. Part of that was because he had more horses in the rotation,
yes.
in the lineup.
Yes, absolutely.
And what happened? They broke the longest postseason winless streak in North American sports history. Not even just winning a series, winning a game. I mean, we forget about that.
We do.
They broke that. Then they win the series. They played Houston fairly well until they didn't. And what changed after that? They gutted everything. And you see a lot of is he a perfect manager? Of course not.
No.
But that's not going to solve their problems that they have right now and moving forward.
No, I think in baseball, you need guys who wear well because it is a long season. You can't have guys who are constantly on edge. I just don't think it works. As much as I like emotion, as much as the next guy, you need somebody who is fairly even-keeled, knows when to hammer away, but understands that you can't go play that card every 2 weeks. And I think there's people who are kind of conditioned by like football in the season and coaches losing their minds and they think it can be translated to baseball. And I don't think that's a very effective approach given the length of the season.
And it's April 10th.
And it's April. That's true, too.
We'd like to see it out of the Wolves right now. We didn't like what they saw two games ago where it was, everything's fine. Marathon, not sprint, basically. They were almost doing the baseball thing. We'll get it fixed and we'll move forward. Well, it's April 10th for you, too. That means the regular season's almost done.
Justin in Apple Valley, if your breaking Twins news is about injury, it can't be any worse than the Chicago White Sox losing a game where their tying run gets thrown out of the plate in the ninth inning because he re-injured his hamstring after coming back off a hamstring injury just a couple weeks before.
Ow!
I'll take that texter's word for it, and if that story's true, we now know exactly why. I got a text earlier today from number one White Sox fan Rick Bozich saying, I'm watching the White Sox less and reading books more. Alan Horton, he'll give us the lowdown on the Wolves playoff situation with very much at stake. Dateline tonight, Memphis, Tennessee, a game you can hear right here on The Fan. He is next.
Superior Landscape and Irrigation celebrating 21 years this Saturday, the 12th, from 9 to 5 at the grand opening of their new showroom in Maplewood. You can enjoy free food, chances to win a hot tub, solo stove, grand opening exclusive deals, and a ton more. Check out all the info at KFAN.com, keyword calendar.
Timberwolves back in action tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. We've got 3 games left. This is the last regular season road game. And then the Wolves, they got a back-to-back situation. They got tomorrow night, also like tonight on national TV, but always local radio, including on The Fan tonight. And then they'll wrap up with a Sunday matinee game at home against Utah. Alan Horton is kind enough to join us on a game day. He is, of course, in Memphis, the radio voice of the club. And again, you can hear tonight's game via the Timberwolves channel always, but also on FM 100.3, The Fan. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. As we welcome you back, my understanding based on your assertion via X is it's this simple. If the Wolves win tonight and follow up with 2 home victories, they will be no worse than a number 6 seed. In other words, they will guarantee themselves of not having to mess with the play-in. Is that accurate? Is that correct? Mr. Horton? Alan Horton, can you hear us?
Maybe put him on hold. I'll try to punch it up.
See if you can punch it up. Maybe there's something wrong with the phone bank on this side, and we'll try after that big build-up again. If you have questions for the radio voice of the club, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. We'll give it a second shot and see how this goes. Alan, can you hear us?
Yeah.
There we go.
I can. I could hear you before. I just couldn't hear me. I don't know what was going on.
Sometimes our phones, like in this room, get a little bit offline. So thank you for joining. I don't know. So then you heard the question.
I did.
No lower than 6 out of the play-in if we win our last 3. Is that correct?
Yeah, and it's a little bit surprising considering the big tie we had the other night between 4 teams, and for the Wolves to lose and drop to 8th.
Yeah.
And really, if they win tonight, they stay in 8th no matter what. But it creates a tie, which then they're going to move up from because some of the teams above them play each other over the next couple of nights. Memphis is in Denver tomorrow night. Golden State plays against the LA Clippers to finish up the season, so there have to be losses amongst those 2 games, and that will help the Wolves. So, yeah, somehow they still control their own destiny. If they win out, they could be top 6.
They can. Do they mathematically still have a chance of even finishing higher than 6th? How does that play out, or is it too complicated?
They do. There's 4 through 8 is still possible.
Okay.
I think there are too many probably explanations and scenarios to go through them all. But,
sure.
All the Wolves have to do is worry about winning games.
Right.
And, they take care of business and hope for the best. And hopefully you're not playing next Tuesday in a play-in game.
So Memphis, we'll get to that in a minute. Memphis is the opponent tonight. I've not been paying very close attention to them since they made their very abrupt late season coaching change. What impact has that change had on them? How dangerous a team are the Wolves facing tonight?
I don't know if it's had a huge impact or not. I think to me, it stems just from Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane. If those guys are playing well and up to their capabilities, and in Ja Morant's case, if he's healthy and playing, he's missed 31 games this season, so that's been a big, big issue. And part of the reason that the Grizzlies, were struggling down the stretch since the All-Star break is John Morant was out hurt, and that obviously hurts your chances to win games against good teams. And at one point, the Grizzlies had lost 12 straight against winning clubs, which really, I think, was a signal to the front office that, hey, we're going to be facing winning teams in the postseason, and that doesn't bode well for us if we can't beat anybody who's good right now. And so I think it has more to do with the group that's on the floor and who's playing and those particular players. Because if they're playing well, that's a really good team, and they've proven that through the regular season. But one thing Memphis hasn't proven is that they can make a deep playoff run. During the John Morant era, they've won exactly one playoff series, and that was against the Timberwolves in 2022. And that took, they had to have those 3 double-digit fourth-quarter comebacks to win that series. You could argue that the Wolves were the better team in that series. And so there is a lot of pressure here in Memphis for this team to win. I think that was part of the reason why, they made the unprecedented move to make the coaching change so late.
Who do we use against Morant, against Ja? Refresh my memory. Who do we tend to use defensively?
It's most likely going to be Jaden McDaniels for much of the night. Put his length on him. I was just looking at some Ja numbers, and at least in the 2 games they've matched up this season, the Wolves have done a fairly good job against Morant. But, in that first game at Target Center, they held him to 3 for 17 shooting, and then he hit his final 2 shots, which just happened to tie the game and then win the game. They held him to 19 in the meeting here in January on low, shooting percentage. So they've done a fairly good job against John Morant. But Memphis has always kind of been a tough team for the Wolves to play. I mean, take out last year because they just won 20-something games and they were so injured last year, and with Morant being suspended for most of the season. But it's been a tough matchup through the years, especially in Memphis. And even if Ja is not having a big night, Jaren Jackson Jr. has been a handful, and so has Desmond Bane.
You have been witness to, obviously, some historic come-from-behind victories for the Wolves over the years, especially this year, and you have been witness to what took place the other night, the 24-point lead blown with 10 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, a football score like 34-3 run included in that. As you're watching the latest one play out, what are you thinking about? And how do you, as someone who's around this team every day, knows this team as well as anybody, how do you explain it?
I don't know that you can. I just think sometimes there are runs that happen, and there have been 2 24-point blown leads in fourth quarters this year, and the Wolves have been involved in both. The one was in Oklahoma City, and the Wolves rallied back, and Oklahoma City, the best team in the league, could not find their way to stop the Wolves and couldn't score a bucket at the other end. It was stunning. And the exact same thing could be said about the Wolves blowing the 24-point lead the other night. They just couldn't find a way to stop Milwaukee, and they couldn't find a way not to turn it over and to find their way to a good shot at the offensive end. Sometimes these things just happen, and I just kept waiting for, just to, it's a 10-0 run, then it's a 15-0 run. Okay, when's there going to be a bucket, a free throw, something to break the momentum? And it never really happened. It got to 23-0 and then 34-3, and then really the end of the game was 39-8. And it's just, to be so close to win that game and to be the 4 seed and really be in the driver's seat, to all of a sudden dropping down to 8th, and while the Wolves still have some good things ahead of them, really missing an opportunity. It was really stunning to see, and it happened so fast. And Chris Finch called a couple of timeouts. He made some player changes in there, but nothing seemed to work. And what was stunning, Dan, was that I thought the Wolves for 3 quarters were playing some of their best basketball I've seen in weeks out of this team. It was really encouraging, and that's what made it all the more such a stark contrast, is to have it go from so good to so bad so quickly.
As you pointed out, in fact, I was driving and listening to the start of the fourth quarter. As you pointed out, the lineup the Wolves started the fourth quarter with, analytically speaking, has been the most effective lineup in not just for the Wolves, but in all of professional basketball, the NBA, right? So it wasn't like, that the head coach, we'll play around with a couple of things. He had people out there who've been very effective.
Yeah,
together.
And like I said, he did call the timeouts. He did make some personnel changes. You try to get different bodies in there to change it, but once it starts going downhill, boy, it's just like a slippery slope, and you're just sliding down, and everything you do to try to claw your way back, is not working. But it was encouraging. It's funny that, coaches and players always talk about never getting too high, never getting too low. And I think as fans, we kind of look at that and say, well, that's no fun. I mean, if we just went through the whole season and didn't react, and have, the emotions that come along with winning and losing, that it wouldn't be as much fun. But for the players, this is exactly why you have to be not too high after wins and not too low after losses, because if you get too low, well, then you get in this spiral, this downward spiral, and you're not able to bounce back quickly. And this is something that Chris Finch, I think, has done a really good job of over the years. And I think we've talked about this. After a team has faced adversity, after it's a bad loss, playoff game, regular season game, blown lead, whatever it might be, he and his staff have done a really good job of kind of regrouping, refocusing, owning some of the mistakes that were made, and then moving on from it. They've bounced back really well, which I think is going to make tonight's game even more fascinating to see how the Wolves respond.
Is
there any lasting effects from that Milwaukee loss, or are they able to move on and put it behind them and get back to playing the way they did for those first three quarters?
Well, they kind of have to. And so I understood why after the game they took the approach they did. It's difficult for me to believe on a human level that it didn't sort of knock them off a little bit more than they're saying, because, like I said, 34-3 is dramatic. Wasn't it 23 points in a row, 23-0? Given the stakes, like you said, we're at the end now, and you really have, through your own surge, put yourself in position where, hey, look at the standings. We win this, we're in 4, and if we keep winning, we don't have to worry about anybody else, right? We don't have to worry about any other tiebreakers or who's got to beat whom or whatever the case may be. And it was so dramatic. And so I guess I'm having a hard time buying the zone defense as the reason, because my understanding is part of the reason you don't see more zone defenses in the NBA is that teams after like 3 possessions tend to shred it. So
yes, they absolutely shred it. They find the holes in it, right? And the Wolves tried to do that. They tried to get it into, you want to break that zone offensively by getting it to the free throw line, right on the nail, which is the middle part of the free throw line. And unfortunately, the Wolves tried to feed that so directly and so obviously that they turned it over like 3 straight times, just trying to get it to, I think, probably Julius Randle, who's usually the guy at the free throw line. And, Dante threw it away. Ant threw it away. And Julius had a turnover. So they were trying to find those seams. Yeah, you're right. It's rare for a zone to work that well for that long. You're right, because usually when the zone breaks down, it results in open threes, and threes add up really quickly, and then coaches are like, forget it. We got to go back to the man-to-man. We can't keep giving up these open shots. So it's but I will tell you, some of the comments made publicly, I think, all did not match some of the reactions I saw after the game. Guys were pretty ticked off. Okay. They were upset. They were frustrated. They realized the opportunity you just described, how big the game was. And they know they let one slip away. And so there were some reactions that were more than just, hey, it was just a bad quarter, we can put this behind us. So just to get that out there is that the guys are invested in this, and they were ticked off after the game. Yeah, I mean, to me, their own success is the reason they should be ticked off, because they had, by playing better, had put themselves in a position. It's like, God, we got a great opportunity here. Threading the needle on the balance in the Anthony Edwards offensive approach is always worthy of discussion to me. And that is, obviously, he's shot more threes than ever. This year, he's become a better three-point shooter. It's hard to argue with some of that, but we all know that his ability to break down a defense and get to the basket is so important, even though I know Johnny had some stats a few weeks ago that as a finisher, obviously, actually his percentage isn't as good as you'd assume. But I still think psychologically, the effect it has on the other team where he's breaking them down is dramatic. So, I think in the fourth quarter, I think it was all outside shots from him. Now, again, against the zone, it's harder to penetrate, one would agree. But how do we give me your best speech on finding the right balance for the guy who generally is going to have the ball in his hands at the end of a game? Yeah, it's been a battle, and that's an evolution that takes time, right, for the great players. It's something you have to go through. You have to learn from your mistakes and get better. To your point about settling for outside shots, when he's making those shots, it's all good. But when he's missing that shot, sometimes you're like, well, that was a 0 pass or a 1 pass possession. We should have moved the ball around a little bit more and tried to find a better look. And if it comes back to Ant, well, then fine, go one-on-one or go for the pull-up three. And you're right, that you can't complain with the three-point shooting. I mean, you could argue that he's not taking enough somehow. He's taking 10 a game and he's hitting 40% of them. He's knocking down over 4 made threes a game. That's second most in the NBA of any player. And and there's still a little ways to go in the decision making. I thought in the fourth quarter when things are going sideways, when you need a good possession, yes, you'd love to have Ant hit a three, but not a dribble up three where there's no ball movement, and you just can sense that kind of the offense is out of whack. And I just think it's something that takes time to go through and to build and to learn. I think all the great players didn't come in years 2, 3, and 4 and just dominate like that and always know when to make the right decisions. And when Ant does that and Julius Randle do that, you can see how good this offense can be. And I thought for 3 quarters, that's the way they played, and it really trickles down from those guys. And so when they're making the right decisions and reading the game, it just, it's kind of a cliche, but you take what the game gives you and what the defense gives you, and sometimes that means playing off the ball or cutting away from the ball or giving it up. Other times that means attacking and dominating and having one of those stretches that we've seen Ant do so many times. So it's a difficult balance to strike. And when it starts to go south, it can look not good. And then when it does look good, the Wolves are winning games. And that's to me, that's the evolution of a star player.
I want to talk briefly here about the whole play-in concept, given the way it is playing out in the Western Conference this year, because you can make the argument that this is the best-case scenario for the commissioner when he and his Bobos thought up this whole concept, because games the last 2 weeks often don't feel like they mean much, but this year they mean a lot, because you're sitting there looking at, well, you mentioned for the moment at least, Minnesota is in the 8th spot with a record of 46-33, for God's sake. And you say, yeah, man, that's why all these teams are jockeying, because they all have a feeling that if we get in and don't have to go the play-in route especially, we might make some noise because we've had legitimate seasons. And so I think that has made this end of the season far more interesting than it ordinarily is, and might be a sign that this is the right move with the play-in. On the other hand, you could also argue that if you're sitting at 46-33, you should just be in as the 8th seed. You shouldn't have to mess with anything else at all. That's too good a record to have to sweat the possibility that you got to win one game to get into the real playoffs. What do you think about all of that, the way it's played out this year?
Well, I'm a big fan of what the play-in has done. It has not only brought more teams into the equation at the end of the season, but it's also, as we've seen over the last 2 or 3 weeks now, it's created not only teams fighting for position or anything, but it's created great drama. Some of these games have been unbelievable. The Lakers have been playing great. Denver's had Jokic putting up historic numbers. Golden State is back with Jimmy Butler. The Clippers are making their run with Kawhi Leonard playing at an incredible rate. The Wolves have had some great wins, a double overtime victory over Denver. And all these games seem to be finding their way to the national spotlight on TNT or ESPN. And tonight's another TNT game. They are loving this, and I think the league is loving this, because I was just talking to Julius Randle today, and I'm like, he said something the other day in Philadelphia that, it's kind of strange being back in the West, because he started with the Lakers, then New Orleans, then went to the Knicks. But he said being back in the West, it is crazy at the end of the season. And I was talking to him about it today. He's like, in New York, we kind of got you were kind of locked into the 4 or 5 or 3 seed, even with the play-in. But in the East, it's a different animal, because you're just kind of locked in the last couple of weeks, you're now preparing for the postseason, not as much as playing every night for your playoff lives. And he said it's just crazy being in the West, where every night there's this feeling of, hey, we need to win this one. We got to keep pace, and scoreboard watching and all that stuff. So it's the players definitely feel it. I don't know if they understand all the scenarios and tiebreakers and all that stuff. They leave that all to people like you and me, Dan. And then, but I think it's great. It created incredible drama at the end of a season, where in years past, before the play-in, you had more teams looking towards the draft lottery than you did the postseason.
The West has tended to have deeper good records historically, I think, in recent years, certainly.
23 out of the last 26 years.
That's specific. Okay. I don't know if your research indicates how often the team this late in the season sitting at the 8th spot has a winning percentage like the Wolves do. I mean, that's pretty. A damn. The Wolves can't win 50, right? But they can come close. They can still win 49 if I'm doing my math right. And I guess in theory, I don't know, maybe you'd automatically have to move up if you win them all, based on what you had said. But even the team right below them, Golden State, sitting at 47-33 with still 2 games to go. So it's fascinating to me that it's this, because usually we're looking at the bottom end of the bracket and you're going, they even deserve to be in this discussion. They're 4 games under 500. Like, what's the big deal? And in the East, that's pretty much par for the course.
Yeah, and then even a team like Sacramento, who's stuck in the 9-10 spot with Dallas. Dallas has got Anthony Davis, and that's always an intriguing matchup. And then Sacramento went into Cleveland. I saw a game this past weekend and dominated the Cavs. They looked really good, and they couldn't pull off a win the other night against Denver. But those are even the teams that are below 500 in that 9, 10, 11. Well, Phoenix is an 11, and they're a mess, so maybe don't include them. But even a team like Sacramento or Dallas, I think can make a run out of the play-in. Can they win 2 games? Sure, they can win 2 games. They've got the talent. DeMar DeRozan. I just think this league is so loaded, and unfortunately, it's been tilted to the West for so many years. I just don't know how that. I don't know how that's happened and how it continues to happen, where you just have these better teams in the Western Conference. It's really been remarkable.
Well, I'm looking forward to it tonight. I know you are too, and it's the later. So our opening face-off is at 8:30. Is that correct? What time?
8:15 for the tip-off show with Chris Finch, and then it's supposed to be an 8:35 tip-off. We could have a 10-minute slide, though, Dan.
Yeah.
I know you enjoy the 10-minute slide.
Nothing like it.
So it could be 8:45 by the time we're done.
You are the second. The Wolves game is the second of the doubleheader. Keep doing the work, man. You do outstanding work. I've got a number of texts that have just come in the last 15 minutes complimenting the job you do, and we appreciate you. We appreciate having you in the family, and enjoy tonight.
Dan, I appreciate the nice comments from everybody out there, and you as well, and JG. It's always good to be on with you guys. Thanks.
You'll be hearing from us. Get ready.
Absolutely.
Thanks, man. Alan Horton, the radio voice of the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have a big one, a very large game tonight. And I think part of the reason it feels even, more crucial than what it represents in terms of the jockeying for position is what it's coming off of, right? We all want to see. And they're all saying the right things. Conley today, shoot around, basically said, we're starting from the start. We're on it. And he might be right that this team has done that before, but I think that's as added. Maybe the Wolves just love the sense of drama. I don't know.
They do,
but it adds to, I think, the anticipation for tonight. You're coming off a collapse that has been for the last 48 hours, notwithstanding the Luka story back to Dallas, the talk of the league. That a 34-3 beating in the fourth quarter of a game when you're up 24. Again, we ended up losing that game by I think it was 7. And
108-101, I think.
So, you're up 24 to down 7. That's a 31-point swing in 10 minutes.
Hard to do.
That's very hard to do, but they did it. And for all we know, that means they might come out and beat Memphis by 20.
Well, I remember the Martin Luther King Day game where you and I had the late show because of the game. And
that's right.
That was another where they seemed to have it under control until they didn't. And then that game, I recall Rob Dillingham having a big role in kind of getting them organized and getting them going, and then the wheels just completely came off. For radio nerds that are out there, I just have to say this because I told this to Alan before he went on. I was listening basically to the first quarter the other night against Milwaukee. If you want to, I want people to listen tonight. It'll probably be about 8. If it's an 8:35 tip, it'll probably be about 8:29. They come out of the anthem, and Horton has to basically talk until all the starting lineup stuff is done. It's a masterclass of broadcasting. I just want people to appreciate that and understand it. It took the whole drive on Highway 7. It was Horton talking, here's the game, here's the lineups, here's the refs, here's Chris Finch on this, here's that, all by himself. It's as good as it gets in broadcasting, in my opinion.
The question on the table is whether our next guest, Pete Najarian, will be able to explain the economy and tariffs at the same high professional level you describe when it pertains to Alan Horton. We will get those questions answered right around the